Hola, buenos días a todos y todas. El día de hoy nos encontramos en esta charla magistral o Master Talk que se va a realizar con Keren Etkin y guiada por Sebastián Gatica, llamada Personas Mayores, el motor de la nueva economía. Esta charla se da en el contexto de la Semana de Economía Plateada organizada por SeniorLab. Keren Etkin, quien es nuestra invitada especial, es una gerontóloga y entusiasta por la tecnología. Ella es fundadora de TheGerontechnologist y autora del libro bestseller The AgeTech Revolution, un libro que habla sobre esta intersección entre la tecnología y el envejecimiento. Keren Etkin ha trabajado con personas mayores por más de una década en diferentes instituciones en donde descubrió esta pasión por, el, por intersectar la tecnología con el envejecimiento de la población. Por otro lado, Sebastián Gatica, quien nos va a guiar a través de la conversación con Keren Etkin, es fundador y director de CoLab, Laboratorio de Innovación Social de la Universidad Católica. Tiene especialidad en desarrollo sostenible, responsabilidad social empresarial, gestión de la innovación, entre otros. Sebastián, entonces, como yo les comentaba, es quien va a guiar un poco la conversación para llegar a nuestro objetivo, que finalmente es entender el contexto global, a nivel internacional obviamente, de la economía plateada y explicar el marco de acción también que tiene este segmento de la economía, llevándonos a ver o a vislumbrar cómo el emprendimiento dentro de este segmento de la economía entrega finalmente posibilidades para el desarrollo económico local y también global. Así que sin más preámbulos, los dejo ahora para que escuchen la conversación entre Sebastián y Keren.
Thank you very much, Karen, to be here with us. It's my pleasure, and I think that everyone that is here in this week is really anxious to get into your book, your lessons learned. So I think that it's the very first time that I interview a bestseller author like you. But before getting into the AgeTech Revolution, I think that's something that everyone's here in the way with us want to know about your understanding of the silver economy. Perhaps we can enter and start a conversation through this topic.
Sure. So, as some of you might know, I don't know how many people here have heard the term the silver economy or the longevity economy, but this is basically the sum of all economic activity that's generated by older adults. So, it's by people over the age of 60 or 65. And on the global level, that economy is worth trillions of dollars, tens of trillions of dollars, and it's only expected to grow. And when we drill down into this longevity economy and we look at the tech spending among older adults, we see that older adults already spend hundreds of billions of dollars on technology enabled products and services. So that is the economy that basically enables the AgeTech revolution, and that is the premise on which all of these wonderful startups and tech companies are building on.
I'm curious about you're a young professional leading, and how do you get into the topic of the age tech revolution?
So this is a great question. Maybe I should start by presenting myself, by introducing myself.
Yeah,
So my
please do
name,
so.
my name is Keren Etkin. I'm a gerontologist by trade, and I spent the first half of my career in the nonprofit sector in community services for older adults, and the other half in the tech industry in startups developing products, tech-enabled products and services for older adults. And during my time at my first startup, I realized that we were actually part of an ecosystem of startups that were developing wonderfully interesting solutions for the challenges of aging and for older adults. And I figured that since we're part of an ecosystem, I should probably go and explore and research what other people were doing. And I found that there were hundreds of other startups, if not thousands of other startups, doing wonderful work in this space. And that was actually what motivated me to create the AgeTech Market Map, which has become an annual publication published on the Gerontechnologist. And after a few years of reviewing the market and writing about this market, I decided to create a book around it, the AgeTech Revolution. So that is me in a nutshell.
Yeah, for sure that for everyone that is involved in innovation and all of this topic, we know that these two trends, like an aging process that is kind of really fast and strong in Latin America as well, and also the tech. So I wonder, I mean, everyone want to know the connection. Why age tech? How do you combine both?
So I think in this day and age, we're in the year 2022. our life very much, I don't want to say revolves around technology, but technology is a huge part of our life. We do so much online. So many people today work in digital businesses. And so the older population has to be part of this revolution. And in fact, they already are. If we look at tech spending and we look at device adoption, and we see older adults adopting any type of technology that the general population is adopting. And this trend is only expected to grow and accelerate. So it's really a no-brainer these days to combine tech and aging. And we honestly don't really have another choice because technology is such a huge part of our lives.
Yeah, for sure. This is the side from the user that we know that is a no-brainer, as you said. But if we get into the developer side and your experience and your lesson learned when startups want to get into it, how do you see this kind of the difficulties of getting into this development?
So first of all, launching a startup and creating a product and getting people to buy your product is challenging in any industry, no matter what you do. And in this particular industry, there are various challenges. So one of the challenges, for example, in the AgeTech ecosystem is that you sometimes have to make more than one stakeholder happy. What do I mean by that? Let's say that you are developing a fall detection wearable, and you want the older adult who is at an increased risk of falling to use that wearable. You have to make them happy, right? Because otherwise they won't wear your product, they won't use your product. You also probably have to make happy the family caregiver, because they're the ones who might be getting the notification or the alert if the older adult has a fall. And so this is part of what makes this ecosystem so challenging. Another part is just creating consumer products. That's hard, and marketing to consumers and selling to consumers is expensive. So there are various challenges, but I think probably the most basic fundamental challenge that founders in this space experience when they first get into this is that most of the founders, at least that I've met in this space, don't necessarily have a professional background in aging like I did. And so they want to solve a problem because they might have experienced it in their family. So they have a very personal passion and motivation to solving this challenge, but they don't necessarily have the wider understanding and the broad perspective on the field of aging as a whole and on the elder care industry. So that is a steep learning curve, and that is really a very challenging part, I think, of the onboarding process of any founder into the AgeTech ecosystem. And that's also part of what we solve at the AgeTech Academy, by the way.
And if we see these, these entrepreneurs that are already getting into this steep, learning process, but if you get there and you have the possibility of doing a zoom in on it, which are these kind of areas or that they should focus on, thinking on the future of this aging process and this technology?
So this is a great question. If we look at the challenges, so the most fundamental challenges that are currently being solved by some of the startups in this ecosystem revolve around health and wellness and social and connectivity and end-of-life planning. So a lot of the challenges that are currently being solved are challenges, like I said, that people experience within their families, and they have a very strong personal motivation to solve. However, there are more challenges that are not just in the future, but actually already exist today that have no solution. For example, one of the biggest challenges in long-term care currently is the caregiving crisis, right? So there is a staffing shortage, there is a labor shortage in long-term care. So all of these businesses who serve older adults, whether that's in home care, whether that's in senior living, they experience a shortage of staff and of specifically direct care workers. And that is a global challenge, and it happens across the industry. And so technology could potentially be a solution for some of that labor shortage. What do I mean by that? If we look at not necessarily something that's going to be solved in the next 5 years, but something that's going to be solved in the next decades, we could potentially have robotics applications replacing some of the manual labor human caregivers are supposed to be doing. And we simply don't have enough human caregivers to do all of the manual labor that's currently required in the long-term care industry. And so there are huge challenges, and some of them are pretty major. Some of them could be called moonshots. But even challenges like the challenge of retirement, for example, that some startups are tackling, they can be tackled from different angles. Because if we look at retirement now, when people retire in their 60s and they're expected to live for 2 or 3 more decades, they don't necessarily have enough retirement funding to last them for 2 or 3 decades. That is a huge challenge. So what do we do? That is a place where startups come in.
Yeah, and if we see this as this technology gap, that it seems that is not widening, is kind of, we are getting over it. How do you see this gap moving? Like technology, aging?
So the trend is very, very clear that the technology gap is shrinking steadily. So older adults are adopting technology more than ever, and they're adopting any type of technology that the general population is using. What still is a source for a major part of this gap is the fact that the infrastructure just isn't there. And so even in developed countries, so even in the United States, which is the wealthiest nation on earth, there are still millions of older adults who don't have high-speed internet at home. That is a barrier for technology adoption. And so until we connect everyone, until we understand that internet, high-speed internet is basic infrastructure like electricity and running water, until everyone has it, we will continue to have a connectivity gap and a digital divide.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's also something that is widely spread throughout Latin America, the lack of infrastructure and how to get it into this silver economy. But if we think about the role of government, perhaps, you mentioned that there's a steep curve for the lessons learned and for the learning process, also the lack of infrastructure. But in this shrinking gap and also this possibility of entrepreneurs to get into the AgeTech, how do you see the role of governments and in order to bring and to achieve innovative solutions for all age people? Yeah.
So obviously, the government has to handle infrastructure. So the government, it's their role to make sure that everyone has basic 21st century level internet infrastructure. That is a basic requirement for modern life today. And also, when it comes to digital literacy and digital literacy education, teaching everyone how to use smartphones, tablets, smart speakers, email, and consume government services online, that is, I believe, part of the government's role, and part of it is obviously delegated to nonprofits, and that's okay. But someone has to bridge that gap, and the government's role is, in my opinion, if you want to narrow it down, is to bridge the digital divide and make sure that these gaps are closed.
And if we just mentioned civil society somehow, and if we think about silver economy as you describe these economic activities, like in a wide approach, but if we see the role of different social actors, so which I would love to know your opinion on the role that must possibly have, like a large corporation, for example, and also civil society, as you just mentioned briefly. Maybe you can expand on that.
So I believe, first of all, the civil society, the role that civil society can play is definitely in the digital literacy domain, and civil society organizations have been doing it all over the world. And also, there is a funding gap. What do I mean by funding gap? First of all, a lot of startups in the very early stages find it challenging to raise funding for any type of startup, but specifically in AgeTech, it's challenging to raise funding for early stage ventures. And so corporations who could have venture arms, they could definitely bridge that funding gap with their CVCs. And some some nonprofits that are like philanthropic type of funds could potentially provide funding for startups as well. And also, and what might be even more critical, is to subsidize or fund devices for older adults who are low income and can't afford, because a computer can cost $1,000. A smartphone or a tablet can cost a couple of hundreds of dollars. And these devices are expensive and not everyone can afford them. So I think definitely that can be where nonprofits and philanthropic funds sort of get in and basically participate in this AgeTech revolution.
And if we think about, we do get the idea of the entrepreneurs, also the corporations somehow, and or venture capitalists, but I mean, also something that we discuss here is which is the role of the aging people themselves, like as part of the solution in a way. So how do you see that? Because we can think about an ecosystem that also sort of a stereotype vision of all the aged people, but to what extent you see that elder people are really getting involved themselves?
So what we've seen in the past few years is we've seen older adults participate in the creation of many of these solutions as interviewees, as beta testers. So many of the companies already in this ecosystem have been working with older adults to develop their solutions. So they didn't just go out and build a robot or build a smartwatch. They went out into the field and asked older adults, hey, what do you want me to build for you? What types of challenging are you experiencing? What does your everyday environment look like? How can my device or solution fit into your daily schedule or routine? How can I be valuable to you? And what can I do for you? So that's one aspect of it. And also, we've seen many organizations around the world some of them are research organizations like MIT's AgeLab, who actually invite older adults to participate in academic research sometimes with industry partners, sometimes without, but actually getting older adults insights and life experience as insights into this ecosystem. That is incredibly valuable. And we've seen obviously MIT's AgeLab do that, and we've seen the AARP do that, and we've seen CABI and AgeWell in Canada do that, and we've seen the Longevity Explorers do that. So there is a lot of room for participation from older adults in this revolution, and I think the industry is actively seeking the participation of older adults, which is obviously what everyone should be doing.
Yeah, my question, I mean, maybe my personal question is also, to what extent these elder people can get involved as leading some sort of age tech, not just being like a tested and validated, that of course I understand that, but do you see this something happening now that they are also somehow leading new ventures, maybe partner up with some young people or so, or is not really happening like that way?
So it's interesting that you're asking that, because according to research, the average age of successful entrepreneurs is not 20-something-year-old people. It's actually 40-something-year-old people. And there is also a trend of older adults, baby boomers particularly, starting new businesses in like as a third career. They retire from their work and then they start a new business. So I don't see any reason why some of these businesses can't be tech companies and startups. And I have actually met multiple entrepreneurs, not necessarily in the age tech space, but in various other categories that are older adults, older entrepreneurs, and they've already either they had a career in the corporate world, or they already have some companies that they have founded, and now in their 60s or 70s, they are launching another company. I've met multiple founders who are baby boomers or even older than baby boomers, and it's definitely a trend that will pick up in the next few years.
Yeah, so it's something that just, I think that this narrative is also a way to get them involved as well somehow. Maybe not, as you mentioned, maybe not just the age tech as the latest technology, but of course using the technology to bring more well-being or to their own cohort. So yeah, and we think about the challenges and opportunities. Yeah, how do you see these new solutions or connected further development of the silver economy? Which will be the opportunities you see there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I wonder, if you see this, the further development of this silver economy, which expands, as you mentioned before. So where do you see the opportunities out there?
So there are so many opportunities. We don't have enough time to do all of them, but I'm just going to name a few.
Maybe give it the three,
So that the top three that I believe are innovation opportunities are of course, the whole caregiving crisis that I've already mentioned, because there is a labor shortage in long-term care, and there are also a lot more challenges that family caregivers experience these days, and there is a change in the caregiver support ratio, which means that each and every one of us who has older loved ones, we are very likely to assume the role of a family caregiver, and we will have fewer siblings and fewer cousins to help us share this role, and it's just getting more and more challenging. So there are a lot of opportunities around the caregiving space, both professional and family caregivers. There are a lot of opportunities in the housing space, and I'm sure most people watching us already know, most older adults actually prefer to stay in their home, to age in place. Only a small percentage actually move into senior living. And so there are so many opportunities in housing, because people's homes, the house in which you raise a family, isn't necessarily the home that suits your needs when you are 80 years old. So there are a lot of opportunities there. And as an adjacent to that, there's also a whole huge opportunity of robotics and home automation that I know some startups are already working on, but it's a huge opportunity, and I think there is a lot more room for innovation there.
And if you see, I mean, Latin America, particularly Chile, that this all the population is growing fastly, and we are not that prepared. I mean, the ecosystem is growing. Which are sort of the barriers that you're seeing that we need to overcome if we really get into the growing ecosystem of the silver economy? Which will be your recommendation on that?
So I think it's somewhat similar to other countries. So the connectivity gap, the fact that not everyone has fast, high-speed internet in their home, and the fact that not everyone can afford devices. And I think that, again, this is where governments and nonprofits can definitely come in and make sure that if and when startups in Chile want to start creating solutions for older adults, they actually have a market that can buy the product. And I know that there are some startups like Nimble who are trying maybe to get into Latin America, but there is so much room for opportunity there, and there is really a lot of innovation that is required. And because it's a Spanish-speaking country, then basically any Spanish-speaking product it's like a huge market. So it's a really big opportunity for startups.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Keren. I think that we're getting into the final minutes. Maybe one final comment or something that you want to share with all the audience in this Silver Economy Week that we have been having here in Chile. So something else that you want to add to conclude our interview?
So first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and for listening to our conversation. I think this is a very timely subject, and the silver economy and the longevity economy are probably the biggest opportunities that we have, the biggest business opportunities that we have in the next decade or 2 or 3 decades maybe, are in this market. So this is a very timely subject. Technology is obviously still very much an area in which there is so much room for innovation. There is so much room for innovation in AgeTech. So I highly encourage anyone. It's possible that some people who are participating in this event are not quite sure if they want to jump in. So I definitely encourage anyone to jump in because we need the best and brightest minds working on tech-enabled solutions for the challenges of aging. And it's also a huge business opportunity. So why not?
Yeah, why not? This is the way. Thank you very much, Keren, to be here with us, and thank you everyone for having and hosting and hearing our conversation with Keren. Bye.
Thank you for inviting me, Sebastian.